At the beginning of the movie, we see Shelton spending time at home with his family. The doorbell rings, and when Shelton opens the door, two robbers named Darby and Ames attack him. They tie up Shelton and his wife, binding their hands and feet. Darby then wounds both of them with a knife. As Darby prepares to assault Shelton's wife, Shelton's young daughter walks in. Seeing her, Darby decides to target her instead. Shelton helplessly witnesses the horrific scene, losing both his wife and daughter. Sometime later, we see attorneys working on the murder case involving Shelton's family. Nick Rice, an attorney obsessed with winning his cases, leads the prosecution. Nick explains to Shelton that due to insufficient evidence and the limitations of the law, he cannot convict both murderers. Instead, Nick strikes a deal with Reynolds. Darby's lawyer Darby will testify against his accomplice, Ames, ensuring Ames's execution, while Darby receives a mere 3-year sentence. Shelton, who witnessed the horrific acts Darby committed, is devastated and cannot accept this outcome. During the court proceedings, the agreement between Nick and Darby's lawyer is finalized. Darby even taunts Nick, boasting about escaping true justice, leaving Shelton in shock. 10 years later, the time for Ames's execution arrives. Meanwhile, Nick's wife and daughter attend a live performance, while Nick goes to witness Ames's execution alongside his colleague, Sarah. In his final moments, Ames claims he was not responsible for the murders of Shelton's wife and daughter. However, the execution goes ahead, but instead of a quick, painless death, Ames suffers severely. This unexpected agony is due to someone tampering with the execution device. No one knows who is behind this, but a chilling message is found on the solution container, quoting something Darby said during the murders, "And in court you can't fight with fate." Nick and the police quickly move to arrest Darby. While Darby is at home using cocaine, an unknown caller warns him that the police are on their way. Darby flees his house and shoots at the police officers as he escapes. The mysterious caller contacts him again, directing him to dispose of the gun and clean his fingerprints before leading him to a location where a police car is waiting. Upon arrival, Darby overpowers the officer and forces him to drive away at gunpoint to an abandoned location. It is then revealed that the police officer is actually Shelton, who has disguised himself. Darby attempts to shoot Shelton, but the gun is rigged, releasing a poison that paralyzes Darby and inflicts immense pain. Shelton locks Darby in a room, restraining him on a bed. To ensure Darby remains conscious and in pain, Shelton administers various drugs throughout the night. He places a photo of his wife and daughter in front of Darby, forcing him to look at them during his final moments. Eventually, Shelton begins dismembering Darby. After finishing his gruesome task, Shelton releases the police officer he had taken hostage and leaves the scene. Detective Dunnigan later discovers Darby's body, now divided into 25 pieces. Nick and Sarah investigate the crime scene, a warehouse owned by Shelton, and quickly suspect him. Given Shelton's history as an inventor, it seems plausible that he could have built the devices used in Darby's murder. With this in mind, they head to Shelton's house to arrest him. Shelton surrenders without any resistance. The next day, a postman delivers a film to Nick's home. His daughter, eager to share it with her mother, tries to get her attention but ends up watching the movie alone. The film is actually footage of Darby's murder, sent by Shelton. Shocked and horrified, Nick rushes to meet Shelton for questioning. Before starting the interrogation, Nick tells Shelton that he also has a daughter and expresses a twisted form of understanding, even congratulating Shelton on his actions. Over the years, Shelton has studied and mastered the legal system. Confident in his knowledge, he declines a lawyer, pointing out loopholes in the law that would make it difficult to convict him. He offers to make a deal with Nick. He'll confess to the murders if they upgrade his prison bed to a more comfortable one, as advertised on TV. Nick, skeptical of Shelton's intentions, refuses the deal, arguing that prison conditions aren't within his control. Prosecutor Jonas criticizes Nick for not accepting the deal, but Nick remains convinced that Shelton is toying with them. At that moment, Nick's wife calls, informing him that they've received a video of Darby's murder, which has left them deeply disturbed. Jonas insists that Nick should accept the deal so Shelton can get a better bed in prison. Meanwhile, Sarah's research turns up no information on Shelton's whereabouts or activities since his family's death. Shelton has transferred all his assets to a company in Panama, a country that doesn't share financial information with the US government. Nick suspects that Shelton is hiding something significant and that they must find a way to uncover it. In court, Nick argues against granting Shelton temporary release, citing the risk of him fleeing and the lack of concrete evidence to prove his guilt. Shelton, confident in his legal knowledge, requests bail, reminding the court how easily criminals like Darby and Ames were set free due to legal technicalities. The judge, angered by Shelton's manipulation, denies his bail request. Later, Nick visits Shelton, who sticks to the original deal and confesses to killing Darby and Ames. However, Shelton proposes a new deal. He wants a steak from a specific restaurant and an iPad to listen to music. Nick tells Shelton that he has nothing left to bargain with since he has already confessed to the murders. Shelton responds, "What about the life of Darby's attorney?" Nick doesn't reply and leaves. Later, they discover that Reynolds has been missing for 3 days. Shelton claims that Reynolds is still alive and offers to provide his location if they deliver the steak he requested by 1 p.m. Though they prepare the steak, they arrive 8 minutes late. Shelton admonishes them for their tardiness, but gives them the geographic coordinates of Reynolds' location regardless. They rush to Reynolds' location by helicopter, but upon arrival, they find that Reynolds is already dead. Meanwhile, in his cell, Shelton secretly takes a sharp piece of bone left from the steak and uses it to kill his cellmate. Nick informs Detective Dunnigan that Reynolds might have survived if Shelton's meal had been delivered on time. Dunnigan remarks that if Shelton wants to play games with them, they'll need to play along. Shelton is then transferred to solitary confinement. Nick visits Shelton again. Shelton argues that Reynolds deserved to die for making a deal to protect Darby, but he blames Nick for Reynolds' death because Nick failed to honor the deal in time. Shelton then hands Nick the bracelet his daughter once made for him and tells him that his wife and daughter wouldn't approve of his actions. Sarah, unable to obtain records of Shelton's estate due to legal restrictions, seeks help from a friend to bypass the law. Meanwhile, Jonas tracks down a government official who had previously worked with Shelton. The man reveals that Shelton had been devising ways for the government to eliminate targets in foreign countries without leaving a trace. He describes Shelton as a genius who meticulously plans his every move and will stop at nothing to kill anyone he deems guilty. Nick becomes increasingly concerned and instructs Sarah to leave town with her boyfriend Chester for a few days. He also arranges for protection for his own family. Nick and Jonas approach Judge Birch, requesting stricter measures against Shelton. The judge explains that Shelton is already in solitary confinement and, by law, cannot be held there for more than a week. However, she agrees to extend the restrictions on Shelton temporarily. Just then, the judge's phone rings. As she answers it, the phone explodes, killing her instantly. Nick rushes to confront Shelton again. Shelton calmly explains that his actions aren't driven by revenge, but by a desire to reform the flawed system. He accuses Nick of cutting deals with murderers just to maintain his winning record. Shelton also reveals that he has allies assisting him in ways that Nick can't comprehend. Worried that Shelton might target his family next, Nick listens as Shelton makes a final offer. If Shelton is not released and all charges dropped by 6 a.m., he will kill everyone involved. At 6 a.m. When nothing happens, they assume the danger has passed and decide to return home to rest. Nick asks Sarah when she would introduce her boyfriend Chester to him. Sarah responds that he'll meet him soon enough. Later, as Sarah gets into her car, it explodes along with several other cars, killing Sarah and several other justice officials. Upon investigation, they discover that the cars were blown up by an unidentified bomb, but curiously, there was no bomb in Nick's car. The mayor is furious and places the blame on Nick and Jonas. Nick assures the mayor that he won't let anyone else die. He sends his wife and daughter to another city for their safety. When Nick returns home, he finds a framed photo of himself shaking hands with Darby after the court case. Alongside Dunnigan, Nick arranges a meeting with Shelton outside the prison. During the meeting, Nick attacks Shelton, accusing him of killing 6 innocent people. He explains that if he hadn't made a deal with Darby, they might have lost in court, and both Darby and Ames could have walked free. Shelton, however, disagrees with Nick's reasoning. Nick pleads with Shelton to end the violence, but Shelton coldly replies that he's just getting started and intends to wage a full-scale war, aiming to bring down the entire justice system. Later, Jonas and Nick discuss the situation, with Jonas questioning if they themselves are to blame for what's happened. Nick admits that he holds himself responsible because, instead of working to change the justice system, he became complicit in it. As they prepare to attend a press conference, someone disables their car's electrical system with a mechanical device and then shoots and kills Jonas. The mayor blames Nick for Jonas' death. Though Nick offers to resign, the mayor refuses and instead appoints Nick to replace Jonas as the prosecutor. Nick then receives an email from Chester, Sarah's boyfriend, containing Shelton's financial information. Nick matches this information with industrial sites sold over the past decade, eventually leading him to discover Shelton's hidden base near the prison. Ignoring protocol, Nick and Dunnigan enter the property and discover that Shelton has built a tunnel leading to the prison. Inside, they find all the necessary equipment for Shelton's operations. They attempt to reach Shelton's solitary cell through the tunnel, only to realize that Shelton is not there. Meanwhile, Shelton infiltrates the municipal building disguised as a cleaner, using a uniform and identification card. Nick discovers that Shelton has hacked into all the prison cameras and has full access to them. He also uncovers evidence that reveals Shelton's plan. Nick and Dunnigan rush to City Hall, but choose not to deploy special forces to avoid alerting Shelton. The mayor plans to hold a meeting with all the officials, but Shelton plants a bomb in the building and leaves. Nick, Dunnigan, and a bomb disposal expert enter the building and locate Shelton's bag. After opening it, they realize that the bomb is set to be triggered by a phone call. Nick decides not to inform the mayor, reasoning that if the officials learn about the bomb and try to leave, Shelton will quickly detonate it. Instead, Nick devises another plan. Shelton returns to the tunnel, but the police are already onto him. He returns to solitary confinement, but Nick is waiting for him there. Nick asks Shelton to stop, but Shelton insists on making a new deal. Nick, however, refuses to negotiate with killers anymore, admitting that Shelton's critique of the system's flaws was valid. Nevertheless, Shelton declares that not everyone understands yet, and he must complete his final task. At that moment, Shelton attempts to call the phone connected to the bomb, but it's revealed that Nick has moved the bomb under Shelton's bed. Nick and Dunnigan quickly lock the cell doors and run. The bomb explodes, killing Shelton, and the story concludes.